Hey everybody, it is Jonathan Keller from California Family Council. Hope you are all doing well and having a great Monday and a good start to the week. And to all the moms out there, a very happy Mother's Day. Hope you had a wonderful time with your family. And I know I'm personally very grateful. My wife, Julia, just gave birth to our second child, a little boy, a couple days ago. Gosh, it's coming up on almost 2 weeks now. And we're very excited about that, but it's still a little bit surreal. So yesterday, Mother's Day, was especially special for me. And just as a point of personal privilege, real quick, I'm going to show you. This is a photo of my wife and my son Hudson, and then my newest son Wesley Daniel. So we're very, very grateful and excited to have him.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Greg. I'll show you one more photo real quick here. This is it's a photo of my wife and my son. It's pretty fun and cool. So I'm sorry, I know, proud dad alert, but that's how it has to go. So, all right. So now that that's done, we'll switch back over here, and I want to welcome in as a guest on the show today, Greg Burt. Greg, you were live on camera. Thank you very much for being with us as always. I'm hoping that your lovely wife, Stephanie, had a great Mother's Day.
She did. We had a great time, 3 kids, and took a little hike down to the river, so that's what we did.
Good stuff. And you're up in the Sacramento area, so was this the Cosumnes River or Sacramento River, Feather River?
The American River.
The American River, that's right.
Right.
I should have remembered that because I used to live in Sacramento, but I always forget what the actual name of all the different rivers are up there. So, Greg, we wanted to talk a little bit today about the things that are happening in California. We're trying to give a little bit more of a consistent update for our supporters at California Family Council, talking about what is happening at the Capitol. And first off, I guess we should say want to give kind of a 10,000-foot view before we talk about some of the key things that are happening with churches deciding whether or not to reopen and when they're going to reopen, Governor Newsom's emergency powers and things like that. Really quick, I just wanted you to give an update to people, kind of what is happening, what is the state of life at the Capitol? Because after almost 6 weeks, the legislature is actually finally back.
Well, they're sort of back. Now, we had the Senate just got back today. The Assembly was back last week. Now, they aren't having any floor sessions, but they are starting with committee hearings. But things are still pretty different at the Capitol. It's not the halls are not filled with lobbyists as they used to be. Actually, if you want to go in the Capitol, you have to go to a particular committee hearing. But they're really encouraging people just to watch online if they want to do that. So it's an adjustment for everybody. So we're just trying to figure out how to do committee hearings. You can actually witnesses can actually call in. So that's new and has never been done before. So actually it's convenient if you're trying to get a witness to come in from out of state. They don't have to fly in. They can just call in. So
I was going to say,
figure out.
Greg, that's actually a really big difference. I know for people who have been watching our videos for a while or have seen the reports that we've done, the great testimony videos that you have done in the past for the California Family Council Facebook page or website, they may remember that a lot of times people have to go and they stream into the Capitol. There's hundreds or even thousands of people that have to wait in line. You have to be crowded in those halls where there's very little air conditioning. But this is a big deal. Just the fact that there is actually a change of only having to call in. I mean, don't get me wrong. Once we're able to go back to the Capitol, you and I will be in the committee rooms as much as possible. But in terms of convenience of people being able to engage their elected officials, what we're doing right now is actually pretty convenient, and it's something that everybody should take advantage of during this time.
Yeah, because usually most committees, they allow 2 witnesses for and against bills, and then anybody can come up and say their name, where they're from, and the organization they represent, and whether you're for or against the bill. And unlimited number of people can do that, and so that happens all the time, and sometimes it just fills up committee hearings for hours. But now you can do that by calling in, so you don't have to actually go to the Capitol to do they call it a Me Too. So it's probably a lot of pain in the neck for a lot of legislators who have to deal with the phones and working out the technical issues there. But so we'll see how long they do this before they finally get back to normal. But that's all. It's part of what we're talking about today. Is what is Governor Newsom doing? When's he going to open the state back up? And where did he get all this authority to decide all on his own how the whole state operates, whether that's business or churches? This law that he's acting on, which is called the California Emergency Services Act, has more or less made him a king. And we can talk more about that, but I'm pretty concerned about how that law is being applied as the pandemic kind of levels off, and what are we going to do for the next couple months? How long can he use this emergency powers into the future? I fear that he wants to use it far longer than most Californians want. Yeah,
I think that is a very legitimate concern, and I do want to be very careful when we're talking about this. If you have seen some of the protests and things in the past, there definitely have been some signs out in front of the Capitol that I think, Greg, you and I would say probably go a little bit too far. I want to say specific things about what some of the signs said because I don't want anybody to clip our comments and use them out of context. But I'll put it politely. I don't think that it is appropriate or helpful to be comparing Governor Newsom to certain dictators from the 20th century. I'll just put it that way. I don't think that's helpful to the dialogue. But what I do think is important to understand is that a lot of Americans, especially a lot of Californians, I don't think they realized how much power we have given Governor Newsom, how much power our legislators have given Governor Newsom through this California Emergency Services Act. And I real quick, Greg, I want to go here on our picture-in-picture. I want to show people on our website. We've got a couple of different articles up here on the home screen. Planned Parenthood pushes bill to keep parents in the dark, some other things about past bills. But then there's this article right here that says, Governor Newsom tells churches they are months away from opening. Some pastors aren't having it. So you can see right here, it's a photo of Governor Newsom somewhat humorously holding up a bottle of Purell hand sanitizer. But the title, again, Greg, from this article you published about a week ago is Governor Newsom tells churches they are months away from opening. Not days, not weeks, but months away from opening. And these churches, some of them at least, are really having none of it. So why don't you go ahead, Greg, and talk about this article a little bit, and let's describe kind of what is at issue here, and how this really gets to a bigger... It's a bigger issue than just the idea of even the coronavirus pandemic. It really gets to the question of what is the role of government, period, and what roles should government be able to assume and take by itself without citizen oversight.
That's right. So this bill, this article I wrote, it kind of started when Governor Newsom at the end of last month sort of gave some more details about his 4-phase approach to reopening California, right? And he said currently we're in phase 1, where we're all hunkered down in our homes, but phase 2, he talked about starting to open daycare centers and schools, and what else did he include in phase 2? Manufacturing, offices, if you can work in your office, if you can't telework or work from home. Some retail stores could do curbside pickup, but and that phase was going to happen in weeks, right? And I think last Friday he started to crack open phase 2, right? But absent in phase 2 was churches. Churches were told that they were going to be part of phase 3. Now, phase 3 includes personal care businesses, right? Like hair and nail salons, and entertainment venues like movie theaters, sports without audiences, and then in-person religious services. And he said phase 3 is months away, not weeks away. Okay, so I think a lot of churches have been patient with the governor as far as taking away their right to assemble. I mean, really, the governor's orders have said churches can't meet in person, they can't assemble. Well, that kind of violates the First Amendment, but we were in a pandemic situation. This never happened before, a virus that we didn't know exactly what the impacts were going to be. And so I think a lot of churches gave him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, we will follow you. But now that things have leveled out, and the great rush and worry that hospitals were going to be overwhelmed with patients never did materialize. Him talking about months away from opening churches again, I think patience came to an end, and some churches got together and they announced that they are going to open. They're working with the governor, but they are asking the governor, hey, we are going to open on May 31st. We'd love your input on how we can do that safely. We'll follow CDC guidelines on, what it would take to assembling the church, except protecting ourselves, self-distancing and all that. But they more or less announced that, hey, but we're going to do this on a particular day. And the day they decided to do it was May 31st.
And this is a very significant day, May 31st. And Greg, real quick, I'm pulling up real fast a photo. People can see this here. This is the Fox News article that says a network of 3,000 California churches representing 2.5 million members plans to defy Governor Newsom by resuming in-person services as pastors insist they've been left out of the process. And this was at from our friend Jim Doman. If you look here, you may not quite recognize him because he's wearing a mask, but in this photo, he's standing in the back here next to Fresno's own Pastor Jim Franklin, and then another key ally pastor that we've had the privilege of working with, Greg, Pastor Dan Carroll from Water of Life Community Church in Fontana. So this is encouraging to see. Watchers of the channel will recognize a lot of these names: Pastor Jim Doman, Pastor Jim Franklin, Pastor Danny Carroll. They'll recognize them because they have been some of the most ardent and strong supporters of religious liberty, and they've been very, I won't say aggressive, but they've been forthright in speaking to the legislature in the past. So the fact that we're seeing them participate like this, I think, is a very positive sign.
Yeah, if you ever go to our Facebook page, I'm actually posting more articles on that page than they actually post on our own website. So go there on occasion, and I'm quoting Danny Carroll, Pastor Danny Carroll from Water of Life Community Church in Fontana, which is down south. Has 26,000 members, 8,000 on weekend services, and he says, our churches are part of the solution. We are not part of the problem here, but we have been deemed non-essential. We've been kicked to the curb. And he says, the train has already left the station. Churches are ready to roll out no matter what. And he said, we are not trying to be rebels or activists here. We don't want to go over court about this. But they more or less they say that we feel completely disenfranchised by in this discussion, and the governor considers churches a personal care business. That's the category he puts us in. But the Constitution puts us right up at the front, right? The Bill of Rights. The first protected right is the right to worship freely, and so they just feel the governor is not treating churches like they are essential, when that our own Constitution says they are essential, and we're putting them up first. So it's a kind of a. I don't think I have seen the Christian church in any recent memory go against a government order like this regarding their own worship services. I think this is a pretty historic for this kind of thing to be happening, and we'll see what the governor does. We're still a couple weeks out from it actually happening. Hopefully the governor will have a change of mind and loosen up his idea of not letting churches meet in any capacity for a couple months.
Yeah. And I think that that's absolutely correct, Greg. I think that you look at what's happening here with Governor Newsom, and I appreciate that he is in a difficult situation, and I think it's important for us to be respectful of the governing authorities. I heard a great sermon just yesterday from Pastor Brad Bell at the Well Community Church here in Fresno. A couple of friends of mine shared it with me, and he was talking about the balance of rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and rendering unto God what is God's. And it was a great sermon. He basically talked about the fact that we do need to be, as Americans, we need to be respectful of the fact that people like Governor Newsom have been appointed to the position of authority, and that God has placed them in that position, and that as a result, we need to be willing to give them honor wherever possible. And essentially, what I think he was saying is that as long as we can not disobey God, as long as we can respect the governing authorities and not disobey the commands of Scripture, we should be attempting to do that. Christians should not be deliberately looking for opportunities to go and poke government in the eye. But at the same time, and this is what I thought was, Greg, so good about this sermon from Pastor Bell, essentially we also should never willingly say, well, the government is telling us to do this, and that is the final word, no matter what Scripture says. And he explicitly said, look, if the government ever told us, like the Sanhedrin did to the apostles in the book of Acts, look, you need to stop preaching this particular message. You need to stop preaching this particular type of gospel scripture. I mean, it reminds me, Greg, we talk about Pastor Dan Carroll. It reminds me of our discussions on AB 2943, the idea that they would tell us, the government would tell us, and this is 2018 law that you and I worked very hard to rally pastors and churches against, telling us you cannot print publications, you cannot distribute materials or offer counseling that is in contradiction to what the state thinks is the orthodoxy regarding sexual behavior or sexual attraction. That was something where pastors rightly stood up and said, we cannot comply with this. And I think that this is something that I think every church is going to have to find a balance, because every church is, I think, that was here at this event. If you look, the thing that I was struck by, Greg, in this photo from the Fox News article and the Business Journal article, other than the pastor that is speaking at the moment, every other pastor that was there was social distancing. They were all wearing face masks. They were all deliberately choosing to try to be as respectful and gracious as possible when it came to the guidelines, the guidelines that were handed down by Governor Newsom. They weren't out here just trying to, again, how do I put this politely? I think a lot of times, Greg, we can see people on both sides of the political spectrum that will be. They want to cause a ruckus just for the sake of down with the system, or defying authority or something like that. And I don't think as Christians that's ever our duty or responsibility. We're not supposed to be we're not supposed to be taking on the government or defying the government just because we are anti-establishment or anti-authority. But I think, Greg, you're absolutely right, and we saw it in that press conference, and we've seen it in many other things that pastors have said across the country. The idea that the government has the right to indefinitely suspend the ability of churches to meet together and to fellowship and to engage in the work of the gospel, I think is wrong. And I think that's the key thing, Greg, that we're already at 20 minutes, so I know we're going to want to wrap up here fairly quickly. But if you could, real quick, just in kind of our closing, I want you to explain why that indefinite nature of this is such a big deal. Because the only reason that we have been, essentially Governor Newsom has been allowed to keep this indefinite is because of a very specific piece of legislation that I think most people probably did not know about before now. I certainly was not familiar with all the ins and outs of it. And you've read through the California Emergencies Act, and it's honestly a little bit scary.
Yeah, it's called the California Emergency Service Act, and it's supposed to be used at times of great peril. Either we are under attack by a foreign country, or there is a state of emergency that the governor can call, but it has to be, he can only call it under certain conditions. And when he calls a state of emergency, he has emergency powers, and these emergency powers give him the ability to change laws, to make new laws, to alter laws, to take private property, to do all kinds of things that would normally not be allowed by any government official. And it gives him the authority to simply make proclamations, and then that proclamation is now law. Doesn't have to go through the process. You don't even need the legislature. He's essentially, this act makes him the king. Now, he can't do absolutely anything, but it gives him incredible amount of power. But here's the problem. The law itself defines a state of emergency as, you can only call it if there is an existence of conditions of disaster or of extreme peril to the persons or property. So there has to be conditions of disaster or extreme peril, okay? So, and who decides what those words mean? Well, what we're finding out is the governor decides what those words mean, and judges seem to give a lot of deference to the governor deciding what those words mean. And then I found this also, there's another little provision in here. Well, when does this emergency state of emergency end, right? Who ends it? Well, the governor ends it, right? And here's what the law says: the governor shall proclaim the termination of a state of emergency at the earliest possible date that conditions warrant. Okay, so it's leaving it up to the governor. Now there's a at the very end of this paragraph, it says that it can either be ended by a governor or a concurrent resolution by the legislature. So the only thing stopping the governor from continuing a state of emergency for months on end is the legislature. They can call an end to it. But there's just a lot of, you got 2/3 controlled by one party, and it's the governor's party. And I think it could be argued now that we might not be at a state of extreme peril. I mean,
yes.
Are we at extreme peril? I mean, compared to other things do all the things he's doing justify, does the risk to our property justify all of his actions?
Right.
And I'm just so surprised the law just leaves it open pretty much for the governor to make these determinations. And what I'm concerned about is we should be under the rule of law, meaning the governor and all of us are under the same rules. But once the governor gets to make the rules and decide the law, we are no longer ruled. We are no longer ruled, but we're not under the law anymore. We're under a king. And I'm just a little concerned that Governor is talking about months away from how we currently are now, that he still thinks he has the power to enact all these proclamations and make them law. So that is my concern, and it should be a concern of everybody that we have this law giving the governor that type of authority with no accountability, nobody to say stop, except the whole entire legislature has to vote, I guess, a majority, and they could stop it. But
and that's a question. I mean, Greg, it seems like if it's only a majority, that's good. But if it's something where it requires either a legal change or something, then you really are talking about a supermajority, because the governor could, just choose to veto a normal piece of legislation. So it's.
I don't know if he can veto that. That's not explained in here, right? Does he have veto power over a concurrent resolution? Yeah. Anyway, I'm concerned about the arbitrary rule by anybody.
Yeah.
No matter what the issue is, we should be concerned about it.
We absolutely should, and that's one reason, Greg. I'm flipping back and forth here. I want people to again see the great article that you published here. Governor Newsom tells churches they are months away from opening. Some pastors aren't having it. And I'm going to scroll down here again so people can just see this. But it was a great article, lots of good information about what needs to happen for us to move forward. And I encourage you all, if you're watching this video, please share it. I'm actually going to copy the text right here, and I'm going to paste it directly into the broadcast. And you should now be able to see that article, hopefully right there in the broadcast. And one thing that's kind of neat, Greg, I'm actually going to flip back over to here. We've actually been getting some great comments from people, but I want just to real quick let people see in the broadcast. If you look here, this is the overlay. This is the article that we're discussing right here. You can see it. If you just go to our main website, you'll be able to take a look at that and actually read that main article. It's pretty easy to find. It's right on the homepage. It's one of those top ones that we've been doing. So, Greg, anything else that you think we should discuss? Obviously, we've gone a little bit long, like always happens. But anything else you think that we should discuss before leaving today? We're going to obviously send out that article and some other information in our newsletter. And we're going to try to do some more of these Facebook Live educational videos in the days to come, now that we've got a little bit more of our technical capabilities set up and running. But anything else, Greg, you want to close with?
Well, I just did want to mention on the same topic that I was so glad to see that 19 members of the legislature wrote a letter to Governor Newsom asking Governor Newsom to open churches in stage 2, right? So I think the pastors would be happy with that. They would like to be part of stage 2, which is happening in weeks and not months. And so the Republican leader, Shannon Grove, in the Senate, put out a press release. It was also signed by Mike Morrell and 18 other, Senator Mike Morrell and 17 other legislators. So happy to see that other legislators are also advocating for religious liberty and our First Amendment, and making churches is what they are. They're essential to the fabric of our society, and to treat them as though they're simply, the same as going to a salon, just, denigrates the impact and the importance that churches have to, a functioning democracy.
Yep, I could not agree more. And I think, again, folks, I want to clarify that there is certainly a place for Christians to obey and submit to government. We are not anarchists. You, again, look at the great passage from Matthew 22, where Jesus is talking about rendering to Caesar what is Caesar's and God the things that are God's. You look at Romans chapter 13. It's clear throughout Scripture that followers of Christ are called to be respectful. We're supposed to pray for our leaders. We're supposed to there's other verses that say, as far as it depends on us, if at all possible, live at peace with everybody. But we also are called to never give up on spreading the gospel, never give up on sharing God's truth with people. And I think, Greg, like you said, these rules, these duties that have been imposed upon us by Sacramento and other parts of the government, they're beginning to become very close to encroaching on some of those freedoms. And also, I think almost as fundamental is we have to remember that in the United States, we are the rulers. So even though we are supposed to submit to those rulers who are over us in terms of elected officials like Governor Newsom or the state senators and state assembly members, or even the federal government, that's true. But we also, Greg, have a unique situation compared to almost anywhere else in human history where we actually get to pick the government and we get to influence the government. And if we are not, as Christians, taking our duty seriously, our responsibility seriously, I think we are going to we're going to be accountable for that. God is going to hold us accountable for how we have exercised our freedoms that we've been given here in this country.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, legislators, when they get into office, they swear allegiance not to the governor, they swear allegiance to the Constitution. And even when you get sworn in as a citizen of the country, you swear allegiance to the Constitution, right?
Yep.
The law of the land, because we are ruled by law, not by the whims of our leaders.
And that's, to close, this would be a good thing, Greg. I know we always like to try to reference other articles and other things, but you were mentioning one of the favorite people you and I both listen to is Dr. Albert Mohler, who's the president of Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. And he has a daily show that he does called The Briefing, and today he actually did one that specifically referenced the rule of law and Christian conscience, and the biblical roots of the rule of law and the demand for justice. So he was talking about the importance of lex rex. So I'm just real quick, I am posting that in the chat. But real quick before we close, do you want to just say why it's important that people also listen to that?
Well, when it was written, that was when the governments thought in the divine right of kings, that kings had the right to just be the law, that the law did not hold the king accountable, but the king was over the law. And it was a biblical principle, and you can look through Scripture that God always thought that law, that no king, no human authority was above the law that God established. And that's what Israel was based on. That's what our founding here in this country is based on, that law, governed everyone, and that no one was above the law. I mean, we've heard this all our lives, right? And it's actually from the Bible, right?
Yep. And I've shared that article right here. You can see it right here in the chat, and then you can go to it, find it in the comments, and makes it a little bit easier to find these things. So, folks, thanks very much. I would make one final appeal. If you can, go to our website, californiafamily.org. You can make a donation to the work that we are doing. californiafamily.org, there's a red donate button up in the side, top right, and it helps keep Greg and I out of the unemployment line. It allows us, we've been very blessed during this time. I know that there are so many people in the last 6 weeks that have lost their jobs, and our hearts go out to them, and we're praying for you and praying for your family members. And that's part of the reason why we're so grateful that all of you, whether it's a couple of dollars or 10, 20, 50, 100, or even more, we still have people that have very generously and graciously continued to support the work we're doing at California Family Council, because we're in this for the long haul. We want to see our country reopen. We want to see churches be able to meet again, and we want to see American citizens stand up for the gift of freedom that we've been given, and to do it from a biblical worldview and with a strong Christian perspective. So if you'd like to help support that, you can go to californiafamily.org/donate, and you can find out more, make a donation of any size. We'd greatly appreciate it. But for now, I'm Jonathan Keller.
I'm Greg Burt.
We will talk to y'all later. God bless. Thanks for your support.